Hi, I'm not sure if the meeting has started, but we are in Zoom it looks like we may not have a connection to the room. And I don't know if you can hear me,
Yes, I can hear you.
but I mean, if the room can hear us or
Oh,
not.
I see, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, normally they let us, I saw Tracy, it looked like Tracy was maybe in the room. So I am not sure what they're doing. Maybe I'll text her.
Dawn, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can't hear you. I'm having audio difficulties on my laptop. Hold on a sec.
Okay.
Dawn, can you say something?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Still no.
No?
Back.
Let's see here. Well, you know about presentations, I think.
Dawn, just so you know, they're trying to get the owl to work here.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, why will this not work?
Tracy, we can hear you. The only difference is that we can't see the room with the owl, but that could be okay. Without the owl, we can't see the room, but that could be okay. She might not be able to hear me still. Hang in there, you guys.
Don, can you say something again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Thank you.
right.
Thank you.
I didn't want to jump in.
For technology.
All right, we're still trying to get the owl to work.
You know, the only thing with the owl is we can see the room, but we don't necessarily have to see the room on Zoom. so-
Audio. All right, you guys want me to just get started?
You have to use this through a certain search.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. No, I don't want to share entire window.
I think we should do, I think we should join, I think we should join the.
Well, look,
All right, Don, can you guys hear me online?
Yes, and we can see the presenter version of the slide.
We need to join
Okay, well,
the-
close enough.
You know what I'm saying?
All right, everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody in the room, you ready to get started? Awesome. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tracy Klein, and I'm going to teach the beginning lesson for tonight. And so most people are probably getting their Bs or have already gotten them. So if you've already gotten them, I apologize. This is too late for you. But for those of you that are picking up nukes and packages, this is for you. So I got my Bs, now what? So the first thing you want to do when you're installing a package of bees is obviously set up your hive body on the stand that you're going to have it on and suit up. Then just take the cage and gently tip it upside down so that that can with all the syrup in it comes out. Once you do that, just gently place that on top of the hive body like you can see in this middle colony. Then carefully remove the queen cage. There should be a queen cage hanging from a slot in the top, and inspect the queen to make sure she's still alive. If she's not still alive, you'll need to call your supplier and get a new one. And so here's the tricky part. You need to take the cork out of the bottom and then replace it with 1 or 2 mini marshmallows without letting the queen go. Then you hang that cage in between the 2 middle frames with the wire mesh facing the same direction as the frames so that she doesn't smother and that the bees can crawl over the mesh and feed her. Then gently dump the remaining caged bees into the top of the box. Notice that on the right-hand side, it looks like there are fewer bees in that box than the box in the middle.
Recording is in progress.
And there are not. If you can just mute that. Okay, perfect. All right, so what's happened on the right-hand side is the bees that I dumped in earlier filtered down in between the frames. And so these bees will do the same thing. Then once the bees are down in the frames, you just set the empty cage or almost empty cage in the front. Don't worry about the fact that there will be some bees left, and they'll find their way up into the hive body. You put all of your pieces back together after you put a pollen patty on top, and then continually feed them 1-to-1 syrup. That's what they're going to need in order to draw all that wax that they need, especially if you have a package and new frames of foundation. So you want to go ahead and leave them alone for 3 to 4 days. And after that, open it up and make sure that the queen has been released, that all the bees have eaten the candy plug out. If she's not, and the bees are just gently crawling around on the cage, go ahead and just remove the rest of the candy and release the queen into the box. Here's the mistake that new keepers tend to make is they add an extra box too soon. And so bees don't like social distancing. They like to be crowded a little bit. So wait until you have fully 80% of your frames drawn out before you add your next box. Yeah, man. All right, installing a nuke. Much easier. You place your hive body where you want it, and you open the front door of the nuke. You then place the new nuke frames into your hive body in the same order they came out. If you've got 3 frames of bees and 2 frames with only pollen and nectar on it, you can go ahead and put those pollen and nectar frames on the outside. But if there's brood on any of those frames, put them all together in the middle. And then what you do is you add your empty frames after that, fill the spaces up, and then press all of the frames towards the center of your box. Place the pollen patty on top, stack your inner cover and lid, and you're good to go. Remember to continually feed 1-to-1 syrup. This is what it looks like. Then for those of you that already have installed your bees, what do I do next? So continually feed that 1-to-1 syrup. That's what's so important for the wax building. If you stop feeding them, they'll slow down their wax production dramatically. So remember to just keep that 1-to-1 syrup going if you want lots of comb. About a week after you've installed your package or your nuke, make sure your queen is going and laying. By the way, if you bought a nuke, she should be free roaming. She shouldn't be in a cage. She should be also have all stages of brood and pollen and nectar and capped brood and eggs. Once they're 80% drawn out, go ahead and add your thing, next box, and keep feeding again at least until the blackberry seed bloom goes. When you decide to inspect, make sure that you've got a plan. You want to make sure also that you're in there as little as possible. So what's your plan? You want to first light your smoker, suit up, bring all your tools and an online device, if that's what you decide to use, out there with you. And it's really best to not remove any frames unless it's 55 or warmer outside. It's nice if you can work your colony from the side or the back. Otherwise, they pile up behind you trying to get in. And they also get a little snarky when you stand in the front. And then you'll read online, never open your boxes if it's windy or rainy. Well, those people wrote that don't live here. Sometimes you just have to, or you go out in between rainstorms. So I say avoid opening them if you can. And certainly have your smoker going if you're out there on a windy, blustery sort of day, because they don't really like you out there then. And then complete all your inspections if you can in the mid-afternoon time frame, 2 to say 4 o'clock, because that's when most of the foragers are out. And they're the ones that are most snarky about you being in the colony anyway. And then finally, a word on feeding your bees. It's super important to continuously feed them. So often people tell me, hey, my bees aren't drawing any comb. And I ask them, well, are you still feeding them? They're like, well, no. Okay, we'll start again. And so try to avoid letting them run out of syrup. That's why I like the top feeders the best. The frame feeders, you have to get, suited up to get inside to fill them up. These top feeders are really nice, whatever top feeder you want.
Tracy, the slides are not advancing. I'm sorry.
Oh, which slide are you on?
I'm sorry, we're still on the first slide.
Oh my God.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. All right.
However, the owl is working. I can see you now.
Owl's working great. Okay, let me get back to the Zoom. Stop sharing. Cancel. Oh, now it's just totally frozen up.
That's weird.
I know. Now it's not letting me. All right, well, the heck with it. We're just gonna chalk this up to what a great day. All right. So anyway, my shtick about continually feeding, make sure that you do continually feed. So often people say, oh, well, they stop producing wax. And you'll read a lot online about, oh, never feed your bees during honey flow. And unless you're planning on selling your honey, I wouldn't worry about that, especially if you need to build wax. It doesn't matter if you have a little bit of sugar syrup mixed in with your honey, so long as you're not selling it. So err on the side of feeding your bees until you've got all of your comb drawn out. And so with that, I'll go ahead and email Peter the slides, and then they can distribute the slides to everybody in a PDF so that you guys can see those. And I'll open it up for questions. Sorry about that, you guys.
Did we almost get through?
It didn't advance.
Yeah, but we could see him here.
Yeah, that was the last slide anyway.
Oh,
All right, so we'll open it up for questions. If anybody online has questions, or if anybody in the room, there's a question over here.
I got a top feeder, true, syrup, and it's got a flat bottom, so you can't just, it's hard to just put it on top of the frames, because it squishes over. You see what it is.
So the question was in the room, it was, I've got a top feeder and it's hard to put that on top of the frames because it squishes bees. And so the important thing if you're using a top feeder is to also use an inner cover. And for those of you in the room that can see this, I have a brand new inner cover for Kit. And so the feeder sits on top of the inner cover. Here's the inner cover. It sits on top. And then it doesn't squish the bees, and the bees come up through this hole where my hand is in order to get to the syrup. Yes, so the inner cover should go on top of your top frame of bees, and then the feeder goes here, and then any, can I take this? But then I won't be on camera.
You're on camera on your computer.
Yeah. So you would put your inner cover here, you would put a shim or a empty box over the top of this, and then your top telescoping cover goes on top of that.
They put the honey patties on the floaters or in the top feeder.
Wait, will you say that again?
There's a top feeder that has floating frames, and syrup, they float on top of the syrup.
Oh, right.
And I just thought, well, I can't put the patties underneath that, so I'll put it
No, either way, it goes on top of the,
or on top of that.
yeah.
So this won't affect your video.
Okay, go ahead.
It'll just affect this. and
Yeah,
then I
that's
can
okay.
put everything else up.
They're going to do that over there. All right, other questions? Questions abound. All right, in the chat. Are there questions in the chat? Oh, this is good. Kathy says, I use a screw to get the cork out of the queen case, because when you have gloves on, it's really hard to get that cork out. And if you happen to accidentally have the queen fly out while you're trying to get her out of the cage, worry, but stand still. Because if you stand still, she orients to the big white body next to the colony. So stay there and she'll probably fly back in. Locke has a question online.
So I had to do a split the very end of March, and the queen, I guess it's probably just around now, starting to get back to business. But hive has like backfilled the brood area with nectar and pollen. What's the best way? Like, will they just move that for her, or do I need to like rearrange frames to
Yeah.
make it work?
So for those of you in the room, the question was, I've split my colony. They've raised a new queen, but the maple flow was so amazing that they have filled all of the brood space. Will I need to make room? Yes, absolutely. They won't move that. She just won't have anywhere to lay. So you could either take that box that's completely full and super it. So you could pick it up, put an empty box with drawn comb underneath it, and then put that one on top, or you could move the frames out of the center up to a different box and put drawn comb in the middle for them to draw out, drawn comb, then she'll lay in there. If you need to draw comb, then you'll need to probably feed them a little bit to one-to-one syrup to make sure they actually draw that comb out. Because variable on how long the maple flow is going to last.
Would you put
Yeah.
that in the middle of the nest, or would you put it off? to the
There's
side?
there's no nest right now because there's
Right.
no
but
there's no
still-
space for the queen to lay.
So she'd probably tell them to hurry up and like wax.
Yeah. So Kit said she'll tell them to hurry up and lay wax, but actually the queen doesn't tell them anything. The workers make all the decisions.
So just so I understood, I could put a deep box on the bottom of the current, or
Yeah.
another box on the bottom. Okay.
Question in the room.
days. You feature her every day or?
Oh.
2 days to be, was one.
So it's 1-to-1, 1 cup. Yes, 1-to-1. Yeah, 1-to-1. And then it depends on how many bees you have. More bees, more sugar. So
His question is, you feed it every day, that amount, or do you?
However long it lasts.
however long it lasts.
You could give them like gallon every day or every other day, but it's,
I'd go with a gallon at a time till it's gone. Locke, do you have another question?
No, sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. Oh, this is interesting. Sadie says in the chat, I have installed lots of packages and have been feeding, but today at a glance, I need the queen. I saw the queen up in the feeder. They've drawn comb and honey from last year. Will she move down? Maybe. So I'm guessing that Sadie has one of those man-like feeders that are too wide in the middle and they draw comb in there. And Sadie, there's not a lot you can do with that except throw those man-like feeders out and get something else. Sorry.
Can I talk about my feeder?
Yeah.
Because it's very.
Can you stand up by the owl?
And it's almost free.
So that you take that.
No, it's a jar. I take the lid. This.
Hold on, let me
this
get
is
this.
on. She's-
So I take the lid of a nice jar and I staple it all over to make holes and pull the staples out, put whatever I need to feed in the jar and screw the lid with my new holes on it, onto the lid, onto the jar, and then turn it over and cover half the inner cover opening. And it works like a charm. They eat anything I put in it, which right now is salt water. They're really, really happy to get salt water from me instead of my neighbor's pool. That's how I figured out they really want salt. So, anyway, that's free and it's totally, I use an Adam's peanut butter jar because they're nice and large and in a, normal size hive, 3 mediums worth of bees. It lasts about a week right now.
Mayonnaise jars work good for that too, the
Mayonnaise
plastic ones.
jars would be great too. So, yeah, just, the salt water made the lids all rusted, so I had to, you know, get new lids from jars. My neighbors bring me their Adams jars. So I come home to jars on the table. I have lots of jars. So anyway, just an idea.
It's a great idea.
I've never heard of getting salt water. Can you speak more about that?
Well, so it all started, I have water on a hill, I have water. It's always running down. So I never worried about really getting my bees water. But a neighbor said that her kids were afraid to swim because the bees were in the pool.
And they're too lazy to fly the half-mile down to the sound.
Well, it's not even that, maybe it is that far. Anyway, it's a 5-minute walk, but the point is that, they had found her pool, not my pool, I have a pool, they weren't in my pool. So I put chlorine, I talked to Kathy Cox, just put a bowl of chlorine water around, put it on the roof, put it by the thighs. They'll find it, and that, you gotta give them a minute, you know, kind of like a whole brood cycle. New bees, new place to go get their water. So I thought, great, you know, and I waited and waited, and I'm feeling anxious because finally it hit me when it wasn't working that, you know, newfangled pools have salt systems instead of chlorine. And I asked my neighbor, sure enough, salt. So then I started feeding them salt water. And I keep like an old, you know, the cheapest salt, the iodized little blue container. And I just take a fingerful of it and put it in my big, you know, 4 cups of, 3.5 cups of my peanut butter jar with water. And it stops them from the pool.
It's a great idea.
And it interrupts them from that terrible thing. Neighbors.
Right?
Yeah.
More honey. You give her honey too, right? All right, well, that's all I have. So I'll go ahead and get off camera and turn it over to Don. You're up next, right?
Yeah.
We
Do we not have an MC? I thought Magali was gonna MC. it.
No, we can't hear you.
Oh.
You're
uh,
muted.
No, I'm not muted. Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
See that unmute on the far left bottom?
But that's for me.
I
Yeah,
can
I'm
hear you,
Yeah, she
Don.
can hear me now,
not muted.
but we can't hear her.
I know.
We see her closed captioning them, so
I am not muted.
she's.
Oh, speaker. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, now can you hear me? No? How about now?
Thank you so much for.
I can hear you, Don. I don't know if they can hear you though.
I know, I'm just testing for them, Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Just for your own sanity though.
I know.
I don't think they can hear any of us.
Feel like I'm in an echo chamber, right?
No, thank you. Thanks so much.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Right, it's a triumph over technology today. Okay. Okay. So we don't have any regular meeting parts. We're just doing presentations. No Magali. No. Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in then. Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you for coming out on such a beautiful spring evening. I bet the Arboretum is so incredibly beautiful tonight, and I wish I could be there with you. It is an 1.5-hour drive. It's more than 3 hours round trip, and I get home after 10 o'clock at night, and that's not happening. So, but I do love coming to the Arboretum. So Tracy started us off with what to do when we're brand new, and we've got a package. We just got our package in. So I'm going to go a little bit to the other end. I'm going to talk a little bit about, for those of you who had hives that overwintered, I'm going to talk a little bit about swarming. And even those of you who have new hives, you may encounter some swarming all the way up through blackberry season. So let me go ahead and do let me do a share screen here. Okay, Tracy, do you want, or will you give me a thumbs up if you can see the right view on my? Oh, you're on mute, Tracy. Oh. Oh, so it's good. Okay, good. All right, we are there. Okay, so hi and welcome. My name is Dawn Beck. I'm a master beekeeper through the University of Cornell University, and the University of Montana. And today we're going to talk about why honeybees swarm and management techniques if you think your honeybees are getting ready to swarm. So what causes swarming? There's a number of different things that cause bees to swarm. First off, they want to swarm. Swarming is a natural reproductive trait that bees have. It's an urge, and they reproduce in two ways. One is they create drones, and drones go off and mate with the queens from neighboring colonies, and then they spread their genetics that way. Another way that bees reproduce is they take their colony and they split it in half. And where it was one, they make two or sometimes even more if there's subsequent swarms. So it's a natural biological urge for bees to swarm. As beekeepers, we want to help them to create more bees, but we want to do it within our own yard for a couple of reasons. One is swarms most often do not survive. So when your bees are doing their natural thing and they're going off into the horizon and you're trying to get them to come back into your yard, they're gone and they often don't survive. The Pacific Northwest is not kind to bees. It's too wet and it's too cold in the winter. And when they do survive, the rare time when a swarm does survive, it's often in the wall of someone's house, one of your neighbor's houses. So to be responsible beekeepers, we really need to minimize the amount that our bees swarm, try and prevent it. And through swarming, you can actually keep your bees. You can either get more bees or you can get more honey. There's ways to leverage off of their natural swarming urge. And if they're looking to swarm because they've grown really big, that's a good thing. That means that they're healthy and they're happy and they're doing well. This swarm management is just another way to manage and help your bees to grow. So bees often swarm when the hive becomes too crowded. So remember that bees communicate through pheromones. And pheromones in the hive is kind of like a language. The brood sounds like a room full of crying babies with all the hunger pheromones that they send out. And the foragers come in with their, their outside pheromones. And there's all this different noise from pheromones that can go on inside of a colony. And when the colony is growing quickly in the spring, so you've got a lot of bees there already, and the queen is starting to lay whole frames of brood, 4, 5, 10, 12 frames of brood. There's a lot of nurse bees in the colony already that's taking care of that brood. And then there's this whole nother large amount of nurse bees that are just about to emerge. And it gets really crowded, and they know it's getting crowded. It gets physically crowded and it gets pheromonally crowded. And that really helps to stimulate the urge to swarm. But also, crowding can happen even in a colony that looks to us like it's half empty. So only space that bees really recognize is drawn comb. If it's foundation and there's no comb drawn on it, they can't use that and they don't recognize that as space. So another form of crowding that happens is the foragers right now are bringing in all of that maple syrup, all of the maple honey, and the queen is brooding up and laying a whole lot of brood. Well, pretty soon, if they don't have 2 or sometimes 3 boxes that they can bring all the honey in and lay all their brood, then they get what's crowded for space, crowded for comb. So you always want to look at your colony when you do your inspections and make sure that there is enough room, and room is drawn comb, that there's enough drawn comb room for both food storage and for the queen to lay her brood. Because if the queen starts going to lay brood and she hits what's called a honey wall, she hits combs full of honey on either side, and there's nowhere that she can see to lay, even though it's 2 frames away, there's more room. It has to be kind of right next to the brood nest for her usually. Then she's going to think it's too crowded, and that might trigger swarming. So whenever I go into my brood nest, I look and I see, okay, here's the frame where the brood nest started, and I'm going checking all 10 frames, and here's the frame where the brood nest ended. I want the frame on either side of that to be space that the queen can either use or that the nurse bees can draw out with comb quickly. So ideally, what I like to do is I like to have an open drawn comb on one side that the queen can jump on and keep laying. And also, it's a great spot on the other side of the brood nest to put an undrawn foundation. And then because the pressure of the brood nest is right there, the nurse bees will draw that out for you right away. So it's a real good way to get extra comb drawn out in the spring also. So hive crowding with lots and lots of young nurse bees or not enough wax is both of those cause crowding that triggers swarming. Now, also along with crowding is it can cause the appearance of the queen pheromone to decrease. So the queen pheromone is spread through trophallaxis with the bees, or it's also spread by her feet when she walks around in the hive, or the bees groom that pheromone off of her and they spread it from bee to bee throughout the colony. And if you're in 3 deeps and the queen pheromone sometimes has a hard time getting spread that far, basically the colony becomes so large that her pheromone basically becomes diluted and doesn't get all the way up to the edges. And the bees on the edges may perceive no queen pheromone and think they're queenless and start making these kind of random queen cells around the edges of the main hive area. Another thing that causes queen pheromones to decrease is age. First year queens have a lot stronger pheromones and tend to hold the colony together a lot more tightly. Second year queens are about 80% more likely to swarm. So it really does help to kind of keep refreshing your queens every year or 2. You want to make sure to get a new queen in there because as their pheromones decline, they're going to be a lot more likely to swarm. And the queen might fail at a time that's really inconvenient, like September. So as part of the animal husbandry and taking care of the bees really want to have a fresh queen with strong pheromones and high egg laying capability at all times. So consider requeening every year or 2 to help keep the pheromone level high and to keep lots and lots of brood going. Let's see. And then the other reason why they swarm is, again, it's that reproductive urge. They're able to support 2 colonies. So there's a ton of brood, and there's a ton of food, and there's a ton of bees that can fly off and swarm. And they go, hey, hot diggity, we have enough bees here that we can make 2 colonies. And they go about doing that. So there are ways to prevent the ability to support 2 colonies, particularly when you get into the blackberry flow. You want to look at how much food they're storing in the brood box. And if they're starting to fill all of those brood box frames with honey, that's great for saving for them for winter, but it's not something that they need right now. So you can take that extra honey out and you can put it in the freezer and wait and give it back to them in the fall. But what that does is it kind of gets them a little bit more hand to mouth. And when they have less food, then they're less likely to feel like they can support the colony that remains behind. Also, if the colony is getting really large, you can take brood out of it. And you can take brood from a large colony and give it to a small colony. But remember to always keep those attached nurse bees with the frame. The nurse bees that are on that frame are assigned to that area of brood to care for. And if you shake them all off and you put a frame of brood with no nurse bees into a small hive to kind of boost it, you're actually stressing that hive. It's like giving them a room full of kids and no lunch, right? they have to have the ability to feed those bees, and the nurse bees are the ones that feed them. So it's always okay to move bees between colonies, make sure the queen's not on the frame, and then keep those nurse bees attached. And by taking away some of that brood, you're taking away some of the pressure, the congestion and the crowding pressure. Let's see. There's another way to make a little bit of room if we're back to the hive becoming too crowded. What happens sometimes is there's a lot of bees and a lot of foragers too. And the foragers all come back in the evening and the hive gets really crowded. There's nowhere for them to hang out, and it increases the congestion in the hive. So there's a couple ways to decrease the congestion in the hive. One is to use a slatted rack, which is, it's about a 2-inch board that goes on the bottom of the hive, and it gives the foragers a place to hang out that's out of the brood nest, because the nurse bees don't want the foragers in the brood nest tromping their dirty feet across the brood comb. So slatted racks help make more room on the bottom. And even if there's not a honey flow on, you can put a honey super on top. And the honey super will give a spot for the foragers to hang out in a congested hive. And that will kind of ease some of the feeling of crowded. Let's see here. Make sure I haven't missed anything here. So let's go to the next slide. So why do we split beehives? We're gonna, most of this presentation is on splitting. So we talked a little bit about the biology and why bees swarm. Now we're gonna talk about splits, which is the most common fix for preventing swarming. So remember, so the biology of swarming is when the bees go to swarm, they take the queen and they stop feeding her. And they kind of chase her around the hive and they skinny her down so she can fly. Because normally when the queen is full of eggs, she's too heavy to fly. So they skinny down the queen. And during that time, the queen is laying in queen cells, taking those queen cups and turning them into queen cells. And just before those queen cells are capped, just before they're capped is usually when they swarm. So they'll take half of the bees and they'll engorge on the honey, take as much honey as they can possibly hold, and half of the bees, sometimes more than half, will take the queen, the mother queen, off to another location, and they'll hang up in a tree and they'll bivouac there while they try and decide on where their new home is going to be. And if you want to read about that process, it's an absolutely fascinating process how bees swarm. You can read Tom Seeley's Honey Bee Democracy, one of my favorite books. He's this really great nerdy scientist, kind of the father of beekeeping, grandfather of beekeeping, and he writes his books in a novel way. They're really easy to read. So Honeybee Democracy is a great description of what bees do when they swarm. So what's important to remember in swarming is that the queen mother leaves. She goes to another place, and the staying in the original hive are queen cells where they can raise a new queen. Okay, that's a really important concept to remember for splits. Now, you can also make certain kinds of splits that will give you more honey, so that you get large colonies that won't swarm. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And you can do splits to get more bees also. Equal splits with or without adding a queen. And one of the bonuses of making splits is it's a really easy way to get new queens. So instead of having to go out and buy queens and to requeen every year or two, you can do a split and make your own queens and refresh that queen stock every year, every 2 years. So one of the concepts behind splits is that you can either raise more bees or more honey. And with some exceptions, there's always exceptions with bees, but for the most part, if you split your hive and get 2 smaller hives, you're going to lose most of your honey crop. It takes about 10,000 bees to keep house. to feed the queen and the brood and to clean up everything and do guard duties and draw wax. It's about 10,000 bees. 10,000 bees is what you get in a package or in a nuke. So it's about 5 frames of bees or a package size group of bees. Every bee beyond 10,000 becomes a forager and is available to go out and bring in honey. So if you have a base level in 2 hives of needing 20,000 house bees, then you're going to have fewer foragers available. Whereas if you have a single hive that only needs 10,000, then you're going to have more foragers to bring in more honey. So one of the basic concepts is a single large hive will bring in more honey than 2 small hives. And we'll revisit that again a little bit more later, whether you want to split for more bees or for more honey. Now, when is the right time to split? So the right time to split is in the spring when you see drone brood. That's the earliest that you would want to split. That's their natural swarm season when it begins, and the bees have the best chance of surviving and building up really strongly and being impacted the least by being split. So when you see drone brood, you know it's okay to start doing splits in the spring. You also can do splits when you find queen cells, and that's a really common time to do splits because that's how you would then prevent swarming. Is you find queen cells, you know that the urge to swarm is there, and you have to do something to interrupt it. A great time to do splits is 2 weeks before blackberries if you want honey. We're going to talk about how to do it's a vertical split. So how to do a split so you can get more honey 2 weeks before the blackberry flow. And it's a pretty fun, a little bit more advanced way to do splits, but it's not that difficult. So we're going to kind of go through the steps today. Now, the times that you don't want to split is in late summer. Unless you've got a ton of extra drawn wax and you think they can build up well enough, by the time we get past the blackberry flow, they need to focus on bringing in enough honey for winter. They have to have 10 deep frames of honey in time for winter. So that's not the best time to split them. After the 4th of July, they are all about, they're thinking about Christmas already, right? Getting ready for winter. And then also don't split in the late fall. There's just not enough time for them to build up and get through it. So splitting season really is through blackberry bloom, maybe a little bit beyond. I wouldn't go much later than July with a late split. So when you're doing a split, all colonies have to have either a queen or eggs. They either have to have a queen or a way to make a queen. And so you want to make sure that in these splits that we're talking about, that you have the ability for them to requeen themselves. You wouldn't leave all capped brood in one half of the split and wait for them to requeen themselves. They wouldn't have the ability. They need eggs to make queens. They all have to have honey and pollen, ways to be fed. And then you want to have lots of nurse bees and brood, at least 5 frames of brood in order to do a split, and 6 is better. So you don't want to split anything with less than 5 to 6 frames of brood. And then you have to have enough wax. Don't get ahead of your wax. When I first got bees, I was really excited about playing with the bees and doing splits and making more bees. And the thing that I didn't understand is that by the time you get to September 1st, or even August 1st, you need to have 20 frames of drawn wax in your colony. You need to have 10 frames of drawn wax for the brood and the queen to work in, and you need to have 10 frames of drawn wax for them to store honey for the winter. And what I didn't understand is once we get past the 4th of July, the bees don't draw much wax. The pressure for the buildup before the blackberry flow is gone, and the pressure of the foragers bringing in all of these massive amounts of nectar from the blackberries is all done. And so the need for them to have more comb is gone. pretty much after the blackberry bloom is done. So that's also why we want to get all of our splits done by then. No matter how much syrup you feed them, they're not going to draw a whole lot of wax after the blackberries are done. So just don't get ahead of your wax. Look and realistically think of how much they're going to be able to make the rest of the year. So if it's early, you can split a lot right now. This is a great time to start splitting. But by the time we get to blackberry flow, you got to think carefully if they're going to be able to draw enough wax to get through winter. So the first one we're going to talk about is how to make splits for more colonies. So there's two kinds of splits we're going to talk about. One is splits for more bees, and one is splits for more honey. And it's not an absolute one or the other. It's kind of a continuum. So we're going to go through them in the continuum. And also, we're going through 3 different kinds of splits here. And they're also how early in the year you can do them. So the first one we're going to do, you can do earlier in the year. And then the last one we're going to look at needs to be done a little bit later in the year when it's a little bit warmer. So the first kind of split we're going to do is a walkaway split. Now, new beekeepers, this is pretty much the only split people are ever taught. And what I hear a lot is, I have queen cells, I need to make a split. Gosh, I really don't want more hives. I have 2 or 3 or 4 hives, and I'm good with that. I don't want to keep growing the number of bees that I have. And a walkaway split will give you more bees every time. Now you can always combine them back again later, but it will for a time give you more bees. And what that means is you have to have more equipment and all of the things that go along with that. So we'll talk about alternatives to walkaway splits next. But walkaway splits can be done early in the year. So if you've got a hive that overwintered and it's really large and they're starting to throw off queen cells already, and we're having a really early swarm season this year. As Tracy said, the maple flow is fantastic. The weather is incredible. We had a relatively mild winter, and there are a lot of swarms out there. So if you're not in your big hives every week looking for queen cells, then there's a real good chance that they're going to wind up in the trees this year. So keep a close eye on them for swarming. So what a walkaway split does is it gives you 2 equal-sized hives. You basically just split your hive in half into 2 boxes. This is really good for early in the year. If we're still hitting cold temperatures, because what you wind up with is 2 fairly big, strong hives that don't have any trouble keeping themselves warm. One of the challenges with spring splits is the bees can get chilled. If there's not enough bees in the hive, they aren't able to keep the brood warm, and they're more susceptible to brood diseases. So the first one can be done the earliest, and it's also one of the easiest ways to split your hive. And it gives you more bees and more hives. So what you do is you go into your hive and you count up how many frames of brood you have. And in this case, there's 5 frames of brood, which is going to be kind of the minimum. And then there's some food and some other frames. And so what you do is you want to find the queen, ideally, but you don't have to, but ideally you would find the queen, and she is the parent colony. And you would put half of the frames in with the queen and the other half into a new colony. Now you want to, if you know where the queen is, you want to move her to another location. Otherwise, the bees are all going to recognize that that's their queen, and they're going to deplete the daughter colony, and they're all going to go over to the colony with the queen in it. So if you can, move the queen into a box that's in a different location, and even face the entrance a different direction. And that helps the bees to recognize that it's as if the queen swarmed and took half of the bees with her. Now, in this illustration, this artist has 3 of the frames with the parent colony and 2 of the frames with the daughter colony. I would actually give more of the resources to the daughter colony, because the queen is still in here laying, and she's still producing brood, whereas this daughter colony is going to be short brood while they're in the month that it takes them to get a new queen mated. So I would give more of the resources to the daughter colony to make sure that they have the ability to stay strong while they're raising a new queen. And again, you want to make sure that this daughter colony has eggs in it so they can make a queen. Now, optionally, you can do a walkaway split where you add a queen. And so you can purchase a queen somewhere and just add that queen in a cage, just like you would in a package, and give her the 3 days to be accepted in this colony. And this early in the year, it's probably okay to give them, 30 days to make and get a queen mated. There's plenty of time. It's really early in the year. But if you wind up doing this split, say in mid-June, that is getting pretty close to the end of the year. And we get what, 12 weeks of summer. And if your hive is using 4 of those weeks to get a new queen mated, 3 or 4 of those weeks, then that's a significant chunk of the entire season for that hive. So if you have a source for really good quality queens in the Pacific Northwest, it's sometimes a good option to just purchase a queen and add it to that split. Here we go. Make her new. I got ahead of myself. So we're gonna new queens, making them or buying them. Now, one nice thing about having them make their own queen is you get to kind of go through that whole process with the hive and watch them have the queen emerge and go out and get mated, and then it's really fun to see when the new queen starts laying. She may be more locally adapted. It really depends on the drones that are in your area. I'm in farming country and we have a lot of blueberries. So a lot of my drones come from the pollinators out of California. So I don't know if my drones are necessarily locally adapted around here, but in your area, they may be. But it takes 20 days less to get a purchase queen up and running than it does to get one to have them make their own. So introduction is only 4 days, and it takes about 24 days to raise a queen. So it's a 3-week difference, which is not insignificant in our short Northwest summers. So that was a walkaway split where you either add a queen or not. It's entirely up to you. Oh, if you decide not to add a queen, you can always go back later and do a newspaper combine. So let's say they've raised a queen, you've got a brand new queen, daughter queen in one colony, and the original mother queen in another colony. You can come back later and you can either pinch or give away that original mother queen and do a newspaper combine with the daughter queen, and you've essentially requeened your colony with very little effort and with a queen that those bees made themselves. So that is one really positive part of having them raise their own queens. So now we're going to talk a little bit about making splits for more honey. Now these are a little bit, there's a little bit more concept to these. They're not quite as simple as a walkaway split, but it's really nice to have alternatives to having to have more hives every time your queens make queen cells. And just a word of caution. If your bees are making queen cells and they want to swarm, you can't just crush those queen cells and think it's going to stop them from wanting to swarm. It gets hardwired into their brains and can be really hard to stop that swarming urge sometimes. So you really do need to do some kind of manipulation where you, again, remember, you take the queen and you remove her to another place, another colony. You make the bees think that she's gone. And that makes them think that they swarmed, and it takes away that swarm urge. So a walkaway split does that. Now we're going to talk about how to do what I call honey splits. The goal to get more honey is to have no open brood. So as long as you have open brood, remember the pheromones from the open brood sounds like a room full of crying babies. And the bees go, we need to keep all of these bees as nurse bees to feed the babies. Bees are really unique in that they can change the rate at which they age, depending on what the colony needs. So if they need a lot of nurse bees, then they're going to delay turning into foragers, maturing into foragers. However, and so they can feed all of that brood. However, if there's no brood to feed, then all of those nurse bees are going to convert to foragers and can bring in more honey. So the trick to having more honey is to not have any open brood, and all of your bees will become foragers. So let's take a look at one way to do that. The first easiest way is called a cut down split. It prevents swarming and it gives you more honey. So remember, the goal to getting more honey is to have a really big hive. So you want to keep it down to just those 10,000 nurse bees, and then everybody else can go out and forage for honey. So what you start out with is a large hive, and what you're doing, you've got a large hive that's at risk for swarming. Either they've already made queen cells, or they're just so large that you're worried that they're going to swarm. It often happens when they've overwintered, especially with the carniolans. They grow really fast when they're brooding up. And sometimes, quite often, you can have a queen that's over 1 year old. So if you've got carniolans that overwintered and your queen is on her 2nd or 3rd year, that's going to be a hive that you want to watch really closely. And then ideally, if you can do these splits 2 to 4 weeks, even it says 2 weeks, I think 4 weeks is good too, a month before the blackberries bloom. So we get blackberries blooming in mid-June. So you could do this as early as May 15th, which, believe it or not, is only 3 weeks away. The weather turns beautiful and all of a sudden the clock speeds up and time is just like flying by. But we're coming up on mid-May already. So if you can do a split like this 2 to 4 weeks before the blackberries bloom, then all of your bees will convert to foragers and you'll get more honey. So what you do is you go into your hive and you find your queen. And you want to pull her out into a nuke. So this is what the professionals do every year when they bring their colonies back out of almonds, is they just cut those hives down and they pull nukes out of them until they wind up with small hives that can build up again. Instead of doing multiple cuts, we're just going to do one cut. We're just cutting out the queen and basically making a nuke. We want 3 frames of brood and a couple frames of food. And make sure there's some empty room in there for the queen to lay. So don't completely pack that full. She needs to have room to lay. And then this nuke will eventually then grow up into a 10 frame. So the queen will keep growing and you'll just keep putting her into a larger box as if you bought a second nuke. So you want to take that nuke and you want to put it in a new spot in the yard, because you're taking the queen away from the original location. And the queen gets all of the open brood and the attached nurse bees, except for 1 frame. So they get to keep 1 frame of eggs so that they can make a queen out of that. But you don't want to leave a whole bunch of open brood in this daughter colony, because they'll make a whole lot of queen cells. So just give them 1 frame with eggs on it so they have enough to make a new queen. And you want to give the nuke most of the food. So you're trying to skinny this hive down and you want to encourage them to forage. So if they don't have a whole lot of food, they'll be more motivated to forage. The little nuke has all but 1 frame of the open brood, most of the food, and the original queen, and she's got a little bit of drawn comb and foundation in there, so she has room. And if anywhere along the way this fails, you just do a newspaper combine and you can combine her back together again. Now, the large hive stays in the original spot in the yard, and all of the foragers will come back to this hive. And this hive gets all of the capped brood. You want those bees that are going to emerge and mature into foragers as quickly as possible, and that's the capped brood. It has no queen. It has that 1 frame with eggs. You want to put a mark on top of the frame with eggs, so when you're going through and checking their progress on making a new queen, then you just easily know which frame to pull out and look at. And in this case, you do want them to make a new queen. This is not one where you would add a queen, because during that time when the queen isn't laying, all of this open brood emerges. And since there's no brood for them to take care of, all of those bees become foragers. So what you've got here is a box that is packed full of bees and no brood to take care of. So you get an entire box full of foragers, and they're in the process of working on one frame where they can make, just a few queen cells. If they make 15 queen cells, knock it down to just 2 queen cells. Don't give them a whole lot of queen cells because they might swarm with subsequent swarms. So just give them a couple queen cells, just enough to make a queen. And they should have lots of room, lots of open drawn comb to bring the nectar in. And you want to give them kind of the bare minimum of food, but watch out for good foraging weather. So if we get a week of rain, you don't want to strip them down too far, or it'll wind up negatively affecting them. And so during the next month, the original queen here is building up and will go into a 10 frame and can be combined back in later if you don't want more bees. But this main hive is going to give you a lot of honey. So instead of having 2 small hives, you've got a small hive building up and a large honey producing hive. So that's kind of a variation on a split that will give you more honey. And then, so let's see. Oops. Okay, so I talked ahead of my slides again. Here we go. So the oh, I've got the wrong pictures. I got my picture swapped. So the one hive is making a few queen cells. So you want to crush the excess beyond 2. But since they have so many bees in there, they're going to make a really high quality queen. So back in this original hive, you're making a queen, there's a ton of bees in there to feed that queen. There's not a lot of brood in there competing with all of the food for their nurse bees. So they're going to be able to raise a really high quality queen with lots of bees. And then all of that brood is converting into foragers. And they can't swarm. So that hive that's making so much honey doesn't have a queen. It doesn't have very much brood, and it doesn't have a ton of food yet. So they simply cannot swarm. And then the hive that has the queen, they're busy caring for the queen. It's basically a nuke. You're growing, starting from the ground zero with a new nuke. And the queen's laying will slow down a little bit because there's fewer nurse bees in there with her. So her laying will slow down a little bit. So she's not going to boom quite as fast and swarm on you. But there's a lot of food in there. So the bees that are being fed are well fed. So you're going to get good high quality bees in there. You can recombine it later, but they also can't swarm because they just don't have very many bees. And they don't have a lot of excess food, although they do have most of the food. And there's fewer young bees, so the crowding pressure is all gone. Now, this happens to also be a really good time to do mite treatments. So this is a great split to knock down your mites. So the colony that has all of the capped brood, so that's the daughter hive, the one where you took the queen out of there, in 12 days, all of this brood is going to emerge. And then they're broodless. And when they're broodless, you can do a single mite treatment, a single dribble or a vaporization or just one treatment, and you'll knock out all of those mites. So what you're doing is 2 weeks later, after you do this split, you come back, you do a single treatment, and they're mite free as they can get. And then in the colony that is raising the queen, you've left all of the capped brood over in the other colony. You don't bring any capped brood with the queen. So they are instantly broodless. Well, when we talk about broodless in Varroa terms, we mean capped brood because the Varroa hide underneath the capped brood. You're not going to get any Varroa in the open brood. So you can instantly do a single treatment on the hive that has the queen and no capped brood, and you'll be able to wipe out all of the Varroa at that time. So when you do your split, you treat the hive with the queen right away, one treatment, and then you treat the hive without the queen brood in 12 days, and you will get a really good mite control. There might be a few capped brood in that single frame, but you're getting most of them. And yep, so we move on from there. So then the last kind of split we're going to talk about, so we looked at a walkaway split and either adding a queen or not adding a queen, it's up to you. We looked at a cut down split where you wouldn't add a queen. And now we're going to talk about a Damari split. Now there's different ways to say it. I call it Damari, some call it Demari. There's different, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce the name, but it's called a Damari split. And I also call it a vacation split. And this is the split that I'm going to be doing before I head out on my 2-week vacation in the middle of May this year. So I don't have to worry about my larger colonies swarming. Now, the nice thing about a Damari split is it preserves a huge hive. So it gives you increased honey production. You're not making 2 colonies. This is called a vertical split, a vertical split. So instead of splitting horizontally, where we take a single hive and break it out into 2 hives on the bench, this is called a vertical split. So we're going to do this split within a single hive. It's a great way to make a backup or a replacement queen. You get a lot of honey and you can requeen at the same time. And it stops potential swarming for about 30 days. And it can be repeated. If you need to do it again, you can do it again. I'm going to be doing it prior to vacation for peace of mind. But the challenge is this is one that's for a little bit later in the spring. Because you are separating the bees vertically within a hive, there's a little bit higher chance for them to get chilled. The queen, especially the area where the queen is, as you'll see. So this is one that I like to, it's not an early spring kind of thing to do. So let's take a picture, a look at what you do. We've got a couple different ways to look at this. So we'll see it on a few slides. So let's say you've got a colony here that's in 2 deeps and they are packed. They're full of brood and honey and the queen. So what we need to do, remember the concept for splits to prevent swarming, is we need to separate the queen from most of the brood. So that, or from most of the bees, sorry, we want to separate the queen from the bees so that they think they're queenless and they won't swarm. So to do that within a single colony, what we do is we take the queen with just a couple of frames of brood. Now, in warmer parts of the country, they say give her 1 frame of brood. And I think here in the Northwest, that's not enough. We need a few more nurse bees with that brood to help keep everybody warm. So I think it should be with 2 frames of brood. And it would be open brood. So you want to give the queen all of the open brood, and that will draw the nurse bees down to help take care of the queen. So what you do is you put an empty box right next to your hive on the bench. And you move over into that empty box, the queen and 2 frames of open brood. And then you checkerboard drawn or undrawn foundation in here to keep them busy. So it kind of slows them down a little bit when you've got both drawn and undrawn. So give them room to draw wax and lots of open space for the queen to lay, lots of drawn foundation for her to lay. And then you want to put a queen excluder on top of the queen. So she's stuck in that bottom box. She can't move up and hang out with the other bees. And then you want to put 2 honey supers. Now it can either be drawn honey supers or foundation. Either is fine. But you put 2 honey supers on. And I don't have it on here, but I do think you want a second queen excluder on here. So usually what people do is they sandwich 2 honey supers between 2 queen excluders. And what this does is it creates an open space. And the bees aren't super fond of wiggling through the queen excluders. When you've got 2 layers of queen excluders, you're not going to get a whole lot of the bees moving down here to hang out with the queen in the bottom box. There's kind of just enough down there to take care of the brood that's down there and the brood that the queen is laying. But most of the bees are going to stay up in this upper box with the brood and the honey and the colony that they're used to. And so that effectively separates the queen from all of the brood. Down below, the queen is continuing to go on and lay eggs. And it's going to take her quite a while to build out this whole bottom box. So you've got a lot of time here before this bottom box starts getting crowded. Even if you put all foundation, even if you put all draw and comb in there and no foundation, it's still going to take her a while to get that all laid up and get crowded. And in the meantime, if you do this a few weeks to a month before the honey flow, what you've got is a whole lot of bees up here. And this brood is all emerging. But again, there's no more open brood up here. So these bees up here are all going to convert into foragers. Now, they think that they're queenless. And so any eggs that are still up here, they're going to immediately start making queens out of. And so if you don't want more queens, if you like this queen and all you're trying to do is get them to not swarm, keep a really big hive so you can get more honey, then you would go in a week later and you would crush all those queen cells. And they are not swarm queens, they're emergency queens. So they don't actually have that urge to swarm. They're just trying to replace the queen because it's an emergency and they think they don't have a queen anymore. So you would go in a week later and crush all of those queen cells. And then you've got a hive that's not going to swarm for a month until she gets this bottom box all filled up. Now, if you do decide that you want to make a new queen, maybe use this whole procedure to then also not just get more honey, but also to get a fresh queen going, then you would keep you would keep 2 queen cells in the top box. And it would be just like the previous cut down split that we did, where they're raising a queen in the upper box, but they can't swarm because there's no queen, and the queen down here doesn't have enough bees to swarm with. So that's the basics of a demaree split or a vacation split. Because it's really nice to do if you've got a really large hive, you're worried about it swarming. It's a great way to keep them from swarming. Now, if it's too cold out, there's a risk that the bees either in this bottom box are going to get cold or in the top box. It needs to be warm enough so that they don't get chilled, because you are splitting the queen and not giving her a whole lot of brood. She's not going to die of cold, but if it gets too chilly, then they have a harder time raising brood. So this is what it looks like actually in boxes. So you start out with the queen and the eggs in the bottom, and then you've got the brood up next, and then a couple of honey supers. So then what you do is you get the queen and 2 frames of capped brood in that bottom box. And here is that queen excluder right here. And then you put another queen excluder. I think that with the 2 queen excluders, I was trying to puzzle and figure out why folks would use 2 queen excluders. And I think the reason is because it slows down the traffic of the bees that possibly would go from the top box down to hang out with the queen. So 2 queen excluders, I think, just slows down the traffic between these boxes and kind of helps keep it a little more separated. And then all of the brood and the bees are up on top. Now this can get quite tall. Sometimes if you've got 3 deeps and 2 honey supers, you might, if you've got a tall bench, you might use a pallet or something like that. This hive here is on a pallet so that it's a little bit lower and easier to manage. And one last picture, just because people absorb things in different ways. So you've got the queen and a bunch of queen cells. So let's say you do this as a swarm prevention, that she's already made queen cells, but it's we're in May, it's swarm season. You go in there and you find a bunch of queen cells. You go, dang, I really wanted to get honey out of this hive. I don't want them to swarm, but I don't want to break them up so they make less honey. So what you do is you put the queen in the bottom box with a couple of frames of brood, and you crush any queen cells that you find. All queen cells are crushed. And then 1 week later, you come back and the queen is starting to fill this bottom box already. But because they think they're queenless now, they've added more queen cells to that top box. So then you come back and you crush those. And then you've got a colony with no open brood except in the bottom box. But this main upper box where most of the bees are, there's no brood. So they're all going to convert to foragers. Then at the end of the honey flow, all you do is you take these honey supers and you either harvest them or you put them back on top and you put the colony back together. back in its original configuration. Let's see here. Oh, that's not as good a picture. So that was pretty much it. I think rather than stopping the share, I'm going to leave it up just in case we have to hop back and forth between some of the pictures. So did that make sense, you guys? Do you have any questions? Is that something that maybe you're interested in trying? Oh, the room is muted. The room's muted, so I can't hear if there's questions. And Zoom folks, let me know if you have any questions.
There we are.
Okay, good.
So the queen only has 2 frames of brood and she's gonna build up that whole box. That's gonna do it. That's the whole idea, is that it's gonna go that slowly.
Yeah, it's gonna slow her down a little because there won't be as many nurse bees. If you wanted to make it more like a nuke in the bottom box, so it built up at a little faster, then you could put 3 frames of brood down there. And if you're not going on a month-long vacation, if you just need to not worry for 2 weeks, right? Then you could put 3 frames of brood down there with her, and it's still not enough to have enough congestion so that they're likely to swarm. So the idea is to get congestion away from around the queen. So it could be 2 or 3. I certainly wouldn't do 1, 2, or 3 frames of brood in the bottom. And remember to give her all of the open brood, because the urge to swarm is not going to be in this bottom box because it's there's just no congestion there. The urge to swarm is all going to be in the upper box, but they're separated from the queen. So no matter what's up there, they're not going to swarm because they don't have a queen to swarm with.
So I have a question. I did a couple of, and I was planning on raising queens in the top box and pulling them out and putting them in a queen castle. And then letting some other queens develop and use those for my fall queens and crush the queen in the bottom box. And use the daughter for the winter box. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely does. And this is a great method for making new queens. One of the things I like to do if I'm trying to make new queens with a method like this, where you just leave the eggs and the bees are making emergency queens, is I take little wire cages, about half the size of a deck of card. So you take that 1/8-inch wire, like what's on the bottom of your screen bottom board, really fine wire that the bees can't get through. And it's about, I fold a little box about 1 inch deep and about, say, 3 inches by 3 inches. And you can take, once the cells are capped, the queen cells are capped and the bees are not feeding it anymore, if you put a little push-in cage that the bees can't get into over that capped queen cell, and then come back, write down when she's due to hatch or emerge, then you come back, and when she's emerged, she's trapped in this little queen cage, and you can just harvest her. And I did that a lot last year. I'm going to be doing it a lot this year. It's a really easy way to, if you're using plastic foundation, it's a really easy way to preserve some of those queen cells. So you don't have to crush them all. You can just cage them and harvest them as they emerge and put them directly into mating nukes.
So I just want to wait till I come back after they can.
No,
Eat it.
no, that's what she put it in mating nukes.
What's that?
She put it in mating nukes to be mated. Because they're in the cage, they can't go anywhere.
Right.
She put it in a nuke just specifically to be mated.
So you keep a whole bunch of virgin queens.
Yeah.
And as you need them, you put them in a, replace the others, and they start making.
Well, virgin queens don't hold very well. They really have to get mated. If they don't get mated within a couple of weeks, then they don't have the ability to mate anymore. So this is just if you're trying, this is like we're way off on a queen rearing tangent now, which isn't quite what the splits that we're talking about, but there are ways to use this method to make multiple queens if you want. The other way is if they have queen cells on multiple frames like this, then you can just take one of those frames out and take a couple of those frames out and put them in mating nukes. But then you're kind of losing the making of the honey, right? Then it's so. But this is really useful in a lot of ways. prevent them from swarming, to make more queens, to make more honeys. It's a pretty useful manipulation technique if you can learn how to, when you learn how to do it.
I have a question about the walkaway split. If, of course, in doing that, you get a brood break also. And I was wondering, particularly in, I guess, the daughter colony, and I was wondering what timing you would recommend, or whether you would take that opportunity, will it mess up the development of a new queen to do a mite treatment part of the way into that queen making process?
Yeah, so let's go back to our walkaway split here. So it depends on how you split up the bees. So the most effective mite treatments are when there's no capped brood. So if you're splitting, if you're doing a walkaway split and you get all of the capped brood into one side, and I would have to go with the queen, right? Because you have to have that open brood for the daughter colony to make a queen. They need those eggs and that young open brood to make a queen. So you would put all of the capped brood in with the queen.
Right, but let's say that you didn't know about that and you already done it and had cat brood and open brood in each of them. But the one that's the daughter is not gonna have, that queen is not gonna be, there's gonna be, those seeds are gonna emerge after a little while and there's gonna be a brood break, right? That
Yes,
I can take advantage of then.
absolutely. So the daughter colony in 12 days, or no, if there's open brood, it will take longer than that. So in 21 days, so let's say you get some eggs in the daughter colony also, it's going to take 21 days for those to emerge. So you would wait 3 weeks, and that would be right about the time when your queen was getting mated. So right around the time when your queen's getting mated also corresponds to when there's no brood. And that's a good time to do a treatment. Now, a lot of the world where they have longer summers, the southern hemisphere, where they raise bees, this is a really common way that they use to treat varroa mites, is they do splits and brood breaks, or they'll take the queen and they'll just cage her for 3 weeks until there's no capped brood anymore. And they'll do their treatment and then they'll release the queen again. So people often talk about brood breaks as being a really effective method of varroa control. And in the southern hemisphere, I do think it is. It works great there. The challenge here in the northern hemisphere is 3 weeks is a really long time to lose. It's like, 3 out of our 12 weeks is a significant amount of summer. And also only half of it gets that benefit. The half of the colony with the queen never becomes broodless. So I feel like brood breaks in our area of the world, if you hear people talking about using those as varroa control, it only works on half of the colony, and it takes a big chunk of their summer away.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. What else? Is anyone going to try this? Is this intriguing? Fun ways to play with the bees?
Yeah,
I see.
vacations are scary.
Locke, I see you have a question.
Do you find that they typically fill the honey supers with honey, or would they start with the deep box on top and fill that with honey and then work their way down?
It varies so much by the personality of the bees themselves. Some queens are very awesome and they just stay in the bottom box and then they fill the top with honey, and we just love it when they do that. A lot of times the queens like to move up and they kind of ignore that bottom box. So if the queen is the bees will pretty much always try to put the honey above the queen. That's just their natural configuration. And so if the queen's in the top box, then they might fill that honey super. In fact, they would, I'm pretty darn sure they would fill that honey super before they put honey in the bottom box below the queen. So one way to help with that is you can just reverse your boxes. If the queen has moved up and they're not doing much in that bottom box, you can, just like you would in the spring, you can do it in midsummer also. Reverse the boxes, get the queen and the brood in the bottom box. And then
I
once,
would,
go ahead.
I was actually referring to the DeMarie method, with so the queen's trapped in the bottom, but that top deep would be, hatching out. And would they just fill that with honey, or do they fill those honey supers? Do they tend to migrate down towards the queen to fill the honey supers?
I think that they would definitely put some honey in the deeps, but then when they run out of space, I do think they would fill up the honey supers.
Okay. And then one question on the newspaper combining. If you have, I thought I'd heard at one point, if you had two queens, if you were trying to combine two colonies back again, say from a walkaway split, and you wanted to keep one queen, I thought you could like put the one you wanted to keep, I don't remember if it's on the top or the bottom, and they would, the hive would end up killing the other one. I'm sorry if this is just gibberish, but I thought someone had explained it to me that way. Is
I
that
understand what you're
true?
asking. Yeah, and I've heard that, and I used to actually say that, and then someone, because you ask 10 beekeepers, you get 15 answers, right? So there are some people that don't believe that's true, but what you're talking about is the concept of you're doing a newspaper combine. You've got a queen in the top and a queen in the bottom. My thought
Right.
is that the pheromones from the queen on the bottom move up and appears to fill more of the colony. And so it seems to me like she would have a little better chance of being chosen by the bees. And but there's people who will definitely say that the bees will choose whichever one they want, regardless of the location where they are in the colony. So I think if you want to have a say in which one it is, then you should just pinch the queen.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So has anyone ever done a DeMarie split? I'm sorry, was that a yes?
Yes. Yeah, somebody in the room has done too.
Oh, do you feel like sharing your experience and what you found with it?
Well, it's pretty much like you talked about. The best part was one of the top boxes had multiple queen cells. And when I went into it, I found 3 of them opened up with dead queens, where the queen that didn't emerge first one killed the other ones. Just like I told them to do. So that was kind of interesting. So beyond that, just sitting there and watching the show.
And did you find they brought in more honey?
Why? They didn't bring it, did they? No, this is this year. I didn't do any last year.
Okay.
So.
Well, last year was a terrible honey year. I know there wouldn't have been more. There would have been more of nothing last year. So.
I just don't want it to swarm.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a pretty easy way to not, if you go in and pinch all those queen cells right away, it's because you like the queen you've got, she's a new queen, she's just grown really fast, then it's a nice way to split, not have them swarm, and not have to deal with extra queens or a lot of extra equipment. Oh, I see Kathy's hand is up. Oh, I think you're on mute, Kathy, or you're not on mute, but you might need a different microphone to pick a different mic.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe it's Kathy. Kathy's mic.
Oh, she popped out. She must be going out and back in again. So do you have a question, Kit?
Yeah, my tendency is not to think that this time of year is when they would draw comb. But it's so active and there's so much nectar coming in that, do you think they are drawing comb right now?
I'm actually seeing white comb, like what you see in a nectar flow when you know the flow is on and you see that white comb.
Yeah.
The honey, but I'm up in the Skagit Valley and we get a lot of the big leaf maples up here. So we've got a pretty major maple flow going on right now, which is crazy at the end of middle to end of April.
Wow. That's amazing.
Mhm.
I was thinking, June is when you get your wax, but to do it right away in April is so fun.
Mhm.
I'm at the South Lake Washington. Super. Big,
Wow.
yeah, but they're all.
And maybe some sort of alternated drawn with undrawn column.
I got a lot of drawn, but I'm alternating just to fill out frames, get opportunity, and you, like Dawn said, you see the we would access.
Oh, the big league maples are amazing this year. The tassels are so fun. And someone said you never know when that will end. Right? You can see
Like
blackberry
berries.
into it, but it's harder with the maples. Is that right?
What's harder with the maples?
It's harder to know when that flow is gonna end.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And yeah. Kathy, are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
I don't know what the heck's going on here. I'm having trouble. My computer is old and dying, so I have to get it fixed. But anyway, I just wanted to mention about when you do newspaper combination. The thing that I have observed is that when that happens, the pheromones, like you say, rise up. And normally the queen that's on the bottom isn't going to get the smell of the queen up above, but the queen up above gets the queen's pheromones from down below that go up with warmth and all of that. And she goes down into the bottom queen's territory and then she's smothered by the bees. The other queen doesn't really kill her, but her bees smother the other queen.
Yep, that makes sense. So that would happen. Yep. Yep. And only virgin queens actually kill each other. Once they're emerged, the bees take care of do the dirty work.
Yeah. I've seen a hive that had 2 queens hatch out and the bees kept one queen over to one side and one queen over to the other side where they figured out which one they liked the best.
Mm.
Yeah. Bees, they're just so wonderful.
Good. What else, you guys? Any other questions?
I have some information for everyone before we sign off.
Mhm.
So if the questions are done.
Yep, go for it, Kit.
Okay, so I just want to remind everyone that we have an event next week, next Saturday. The Washington Native Plant Society is having their sale at the Botanical Garden in Bellevue Botanical Garden, which is a beautiful place to visit all for itself. And the event is from 10 until 3. So we need volunteers. That there have been a few people who signed up, but it's this Saturday and we can always use more support. I like to set it up so there's 2 shifts. So someone comes to set up and stays till noon. The event's from 10 to 3, so it'll be 9 till noon and noon till 3 when we break down. So, or you can stay for the full day too. That of course you're welcome. There will be an observation hive there and we'll be selling honey. And it's not a really big event. The funnest time to be there is on the early end because that's when the greatest plants are there to buy. So the crowd is happening early in the day. And then it's kind of a trickle of people all the rest of the time. So just to remind everyone, that we would love to see you there, and if you'd like to come and volunteer, that would be great too. I will send out an email to everyone and, or to those who sign up. That's who I'll send an email to with all the information about, parking and our location and so forth. So let me know if you're interested. And you can send an email to volunteers@pugetsoundeast.org, and that comes to me.
Wonderful. Oh, go ahead, Marshall.
I'll send that information. Okay.
Marshall, did you have a question? You're on mute. Okay. Thank you, everyone. We're a little ahead of time today because we didn't have, except for Kit. Thank you for bringing some club business forward. Thank you. We didn't have as much time for club business, and I think Peter will be back next month. So just if you're a new beekeeper, just really appreciate what an incredible spring we're having this year. We the last 3 years before this have just been so terrible. The springs have. So it's just such a, you guys are, if you're starting this year, you picked a great year. This is really, we're having great bee weather this year. So go out and enjoy your bees. Thank you for coming. And we'll see you next month.
That was great. You guys, we can stay and talk about your own bees and just converse about questions or what's happening if you want. There's no reason to just
shut it off?
hear.
Started with about these.